Okay, let's put our sleeves in. So the first thing that you want to do is to make sure you've got the correct sleeve going into the correct armhole. So I always put my right sides together, and I know I can tell from my notches. I've got my one notch here that's going to match up to my notch that's here. I also can see when I look at my sleeve cuff that my finished edge with the pleat that's going over is on the correct side. So you can slide your sleeve on to make sure that your sleeve is going in the right direction. And again, that's where the tab folds over and the pleat is. That is the top side of the sleeve. So you want to make sure that your sleeves you're putting the correct sleeve in the correct side. What you're going to do then, once you've done that, is to take your underarm of your garment, pinch it to the underarm of the sleeve, right sides together. I'm going to pin on the inside of the sleeve because I'm going to be sewing on the inside. Once I get this sleeve set into here around, I'm not going to be sewing this way. I'm going to be sewing inside the sleeve. So I'm going to line that up first. I'm going to check my other side to make sure that they line up exactly. I'm actually going to switch this over. It's a little hard with the flat fell. You have to think about where the seam is because I have my princess and my flat fell. So think about where the seam is. So I've moved that over and I'm going to check. Okay, now my sleeves are lined up. My seam is lined up exactly. So pin your underarm first. Then you're going to take, and I had you put a notch in at the top of the sleeve. Which is there. You can see my notch here. That is going to go where my sleeve seam is, where my shoulder seam is at the top. So I'm going to line that up. So the notch gets lined up. And again, think about where the seam is, not where your top stitching is for the flat fell. But think about your sleeve. Change the light a little bit here. Okay, so I've lined up my notch at the top of my cap of my sleeve to the seam. And again, I'm going to pin to the inside of the sleeve. So my sleeve is sitting in here. The next thing I'm going to do is to take those tailor tacks that I have and line them up. And pin those together. Make sure they line up exactly. And again, as I was saying to one of the students today in the lab, it's like when you carry shirts around like this, your tailor tacks may have fallen out, so you might have to go back and remark them. Then I'm going to pin it on the other side. Okay, so now I have an idea of what I'm up against. Then I'm going to grab the two threads that I used for basting. I'm going to grab them from the inside of the shirt, and I'm going to pull. And as I pull, I'm going to get a slight gather. So what I like to do is to pull them until it's too tight, and then to work them out. So what you're trying to do here is get that gathering so that it's matching up as closely as you can to the body of the shirt. Because when we're going to stitch, I'm going to show you, when I go over to the machine, I'm going to show you exactly how to get in here and get these little tucks out. So on the inside of the shirt, I want to match up my notches first. I'm going to put a pin in there. I'm using these bigger pins because they have heads. They might be easier to see on this shirt. I want to make sure that my gathering is even all the way around. And the thing that's kind of generous about this particular pattern is that you don't need too much ease here for this sleeve cap. Okay? And you really want most of the gathering to be between that tailor tack where you marked to match up to your yoke, and at the center of the sleeve. You want those, that's the spot that you really want your gathering to be in. Okay, so I'm going to move a little bit of this up. You can adjust it with the pins, which is nice. Okay, so now I'm all set. That's the back of my sleeve. Looks good. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the front of the sleeve. And again, I'm picking up my threads. You want to, actually what you can do is to go ahead and pin it at the notch. Make sure those notches match up. Yours are going to be much easier to see than mine because of the eyelet. So make sure that that matches up. And then this looks like it's all set because it gathered so much. I'm not going to have to pull here, it looks like, because I gathered so much. Again, my fabric is loosely woven, so when I ran it through to baste it, it kind of pulls on itself, and this will happen. The one thing that you want to make sure, and that's not happening for me right now, so I'm going to go back and double check this, is that you have a little bit more gathering to the front than you do to the back. The back of the arm, as I said, is a little flatter. So that's looking pretty good. I might put a pin in here. But we're trying to create a curve to go over your deltoid muscle. And again, I think this pattern was a good one to start off with for you in learning to set a sleeve, because you can, it's pretty easy to set in, as I'm seeing right now. Typically on a sleeve, your sleeve cap, the actual cap of the sleeve pattern, is almost always anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to 1.25 inches bigger from underarm around than the armhole itself. And this allows for that gathering to create the curve that will go over the deltoid. Okay, so just a quick refresher, pin under your arm, make sure you line up the seam, pin at the top of the shoulder, and then pin your underarms, and then take your gathering and just give it a very gentle pull, match up your tailor tacks, and then finish pinning all the way around. So the idea here is to get it as flat as possible. And then you're ready to go over to the machine. I'm going to put my shirt into the machine now. I'm going to start at my underarm. And always when you start, you want to put your needle down. Always don't press on the gas until you have your needle down. It just helps that little jump to get started. So now I'm going to sew. The nice thing again about these guides is that you can just have to concentrate then. You don't have to worry about watching your seam allowance. Making sure as I go around, you want to lift up. so that you can actually take your pins out too as you go. But you want to go down and lift up, making sure you're not catching anything. It's feeling a little funky under there, so I'm going to check it out, make sure that I'm only catching. And then when you get around to the gathering, which I'm coming to shortly, I'm going to kind of lift up and give myself a little bit of a lift. And again, you should hopefully, as you're stitching, you're seeing, oh good, I've basted beyond my actual seam. Again, I'm going to stop and turn it, and I'm going to keep lifting, making sure that you only have the 2 layers, that you're not catching anything else underneath. And again, go slowly, and again, if you have a drop arm, putting the sleeve in is really a piece of cake because you don't have to be twirling like this. You can just stitch around. So again, I'm lifting because I want to make sure I get that gathering in there. So I'm creating a little bit of a lip, and I'm sewing inside the shirt. So I'm sewing, my shirt body is against the machine, and I'm looking at my sleeve. So here I've got some gathering coming up here. I want to make sure that it's nice and flat. I don't want any catches. And I'm going to come right around to where I started. And just a back tack. And again, be careful with your back tacks that you're not creating a big pile of thread. Just a forward and a back is good enough. So once I've got it stitched, now I want to check it. So, starting with the underarm, making sure that's lining up, walking it around, make sure there's no catches anywhere, that I've sewn in a good circle all the way around. Looks good. So once you have decided you're happy with your sleeve, what you're going to do is to take it, and you're going to now go around again in the same way, 1/4 of an inch away from where you stitched before. This second row of stitching is really for reinforcement, so that if the first one pops, the second one's there, so you don't end up with a hole in your sleeve. And the nice thing about this is that you can just ride the foot right in the middle with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. It gives you the chance to ride right in the middle. So I'm put my needle down first, and then I'm going to, again, I'm in an awkward position here, so my foot is hard to reach. I'm going to go around a second time, and I don't have to be quite as careful about catching because I know my sleeve's in. I'm out a little further in the arc, so it makes it a little bit easier. And I'm going to take this all the way around. So again, the seam that's going to be showing to the outside of the garment is the first seam I draw. This seam is a reinforcement seam. You have to be quite as careful with it. It's always good to be careful, but you can go a little faster with this. And again, get to the bottom here and back tack. Okay, and my sleeve is reinforced. So now that I have my sleeve in, and I've got 2 rows of stitching, 1 row that attaches the sleeve to the body, one row that reinforces. So now what I'm going to go do is go in and to pull out my tailor tacks. And then I'm going to trim back to that stitching. Be very careful that you work nice and flat and you don't cut the rest of your shirt. I'm going to cut right to my stitching. So it's nice and clean. All the way around, and then what I'm going to do is to take it and run the serger around it. So here's a spot where I'm going to have to depart from all my nice finishes. I mean, I could bind it if I wanted to, but I want to try and stay with the project as much as I can. So I'm going to go now. Again, go slowly. Please make sure you don't cut your sleeve. Done that before. Really pay attention. So I'm trimming off only what's left. I'm cutting right up to that 1/4 inch away reinforcement stitch that I've just made. Stopping again every once in a while to make sure that I'm not cutting anything but the seam allowance. I think I'm just about there. Okay. And there I have it. I'll now go in and run a serger on it so it's nice and clean. Get rid of my tailor tacks, clean it all up. Your basting stitches, anything that you have there to clean up, you can. Again, when I go in to run my serger, I'm going to go slowly and I'm going to go on the inside. So just be careful you don't catch the rest of your jacket, the rest of your shirt when you're going through. But this will give you a nice clean finish. And then I come to the outside. They do in the pattern, I think that there's a suggestion that you top stitch it, you know, that you bring the seam allowance to the body and top stitch it. We're not going to be doing that. We're going to be pressing your seam allowance towards your sleeve, okay? So that gives you that nice little, it's hard to see here because I'm working showing it towards you, but this gives you this nice little rounded part. So here, if I put a fist in there, I see that my sleeve is now going to be able to go over my bicep and deltoid muscles. Okay? And that's how you properly set in a sleeve. And again, the 2 rows of basting is really key here. It really makes a huge difference in keeping that seam allowance really nice and straight and taut while you get in to kind of capture the curves that it's making for you. So start off, line up your underarm, line up the top of your sleeve, line up your underarm notches, and then pull very gently, very, very gently. This pattern does not have a lot of ease in it, so just gently. And then you're going to sew from the inside, 5/8 of an inch, body of the sleeve down by the feed dogs, the sleeve itself, bottom of the shirt down by the feed dogs, the shirt sleeve facing towards you. So you're sewing inside the sleeve, 5/8, sew 1/4 of an inch away from your stitching, trim it back, finish it off, and that's your sleeve. Okay? Again, very important before you start off, make sure that you have the right sleeve, the correct sleeve in the correct armhole. So don't put your sleeves on backwards. That can be very frustrating. Okay, good luck. Let me know if you have any questions.